So this is probably going to be a bit of a lackluster update because I've been sick for about a week, so it's been pretty hard to do programming with because of my headaches. I had some kind of virus or something. And then the other thing is a lot of the work that I have been doing is just mostly refactoring. So I've refactored the input system and the movement system. I've moved that from blueprints over into C++ exclusively, so nothing is running on blueprints with the exception of a few events here and there, like on the weapon and stuff now. So for the input system, I'm actually using like the action input system, like the enhanced, I forgot what it's called, it's got some fancy name, but that's kind of just like you kind of create these files and then you create like a controller that you can put all like your key bindings and stuff in. But when you do it in C++, you have to assign each like button down, button release, and button hold to separate functions, and when you're doing that on multiple like files, it becomes really messy. You end up with all these extra functions that you don't really want. All these, it just becomes too much. So what I've created is kind of like a wrapper system in a way, which kind of takes them in, it assigns them, it actually like collects all the button inputs in like one kind of place, which is like out in the ether. It's like a subsystem that anything can assign itself to, and then it has its own special events that kind of combine multiple aspects. So instead you've got like one function for when you press the shoot input. Instead of having 3 functions, you've only got one function, but it also sends like the information in like this kind of context thing. And the other thing that I can do with that is have it so I can have all the context for the player, so like movement or aim points, like where the weapon is aiming and all this kind of stuff. I can send that through the input system into other places. So all like the context is gathered in one place and then sent out to everywhere else. So then like they can share the information and basically make just like the code a lot tidier. The other benefit of setting that up is I can also have like a how long the button has been pressed as part of the context. So when the button's pressed, it sets a time, and then when the button's released, it sets another time, so you know how long the button's been pressed until release or whatever. So there's all that kind of stuff that I've added into an input system that makes it a bit more future-proof and more streamlined and easier to add new buttons later down the line. So that's basically input system. So the next thing is the player character, and all the movement and everything that used to be in blueprints is now in C++, meaning it's going to be more performative and just like more streamlined. I've made a lot of little changes to how it all works, just kind of fixed a few issues I had with it and changed a bit of the functionality. So it mostly will look the same, but there's a few differences. So I'll go over those actual differences that we can see. So first of all is we've got obviously all our movement and everything's the same, but I've changed the way dodge works, and it works a bit more like Nier Automata, which I think is probably the first game I can think of that kind of set the trend, because you'll see this type of dodge and dash kind of functionality in games like Genshin Impact and Wuthering Waves and a lot of these like gacha games that have kind of taken inspiration from Nier Automata. So if I press shift now, whereas before it was on spacebar, we then do a dash, like so. But the dash animation at the moment is just a placeholder. I was actually going to make a new dash animation, but we'll talk about animations a little bit. But for now, we've got this, a dash. And if I hold the button, we go into a sprint. So the whole point is you're kind of more like take a stride rather than this stupid animation we've got. But that's basically how that works. It was originally on the spacebar because I felt like dodging was going to be really important, but that was before I decided that I wanted to have the dive. Now the dive is probably going to be the more important movement skill that you'll use in a lot of situations. So we'll see how that develops. When we pick up a weapon and we aim, it's exactly the same as it used to work. Like you can't sprint from this, it will just like dash. But then when you are not, you will actually go into a sprint. So the other aspect is obviously now the dive has been re-implemented, and the whole kind of surface system, I had to like redo all that because obviously I changed the paint system over to a new system. So if we pick up the weapon again and I just spray the floor, again, we can dive with this really weird animation, which again is something that needs to be fixed. But we've got like our normal friction as how it used to work, and we can slide on water and whatever. So there's been a few different changes made to the diving system. So the first one that's probably going to be quite subtle, but if we're like diving and we're going down a slope, there is like a kind of adjustment of like the angle of the body when we land on like the surface. Before, it used to snap. So say if we were coming from here and then going into this, like from this slope to this flat, there would be like a snapping. Now there's like a smoother transition, and the way I've achieved that is by moving the actual rotation from the full kind of character controller itself to just the model, like the mesh underneath. The mesh will like adjust. So if you imagine there's like a capsule where the character is at the moment, when we're sliding, that capsule before was kind of adjusting to meet the angle of the slope, but now it remains upright and it's the character that is like adjusting. So that took a lot of messing around to get right, because how the character rotates compared to how the character like controller rotates, there's a lot of like disparity there. And the other thing that's really annoying from moving from blueprints into C++ is when you do like a rotator, which is like the struct that you use for rotation, you have like pitch, yaw and roll, and the order of which those numbers are like displayed in blueprints is in a different order to what it is in C++. So it just messes with your head. You're like, wait, why am I rotating this direction when I should be rotating that direction? And it's just because it's all messed up. I don't know why it's in a different order, but it just is. They obviously set it that way originally and they've never adjusted it, like, because obviously too many people have programs that rely on this stuff. So yeah, it's a bit annoying, to be honest. So the other aspect is when we're sliding here, we'll see these little red dots that come up. Now these red dots represent all the positions that we're checking along the floor to see like what colour the render target is. So when the red dot is here in this blue area where the water is, that will come up as red to say there's a water surface here. And then when it's here, it will come up as black to say there's nothing there. So that will determine the calculation for our friction. So obviously if it's red, then there's going to be less friction, and if it's black, there's going to be more friction. Now before, that was working every single frame, and it was running like dot 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 dot, like all across like the floor as you're moving. Now I've set it by distance, so it will only trigger after you've traveled a certain distance. So you'll see the gaps between the dots are actually more consistent. They're all kind of about the same length. There's obviously a little bit of difference here and there, but it's basically like there's a threshold, and then when it's above that threshold, then it will then do the detection. And the reason I've had to do this is, I mentioned this last time, where the render target, the way you read it is you have to send it from the GPU to the CPU, and as a result this is a very slow process. You can kind of see hitching at the moment when I'm doing it every time I'm sliding. I'm not sure if that is a result of it or if there's something else. It might be because I'm also recording at the same time at the moment, I'm not sure. But obviously, like, to move that information over, it's a bit slow, so I've tried to limit how much is happening. However, in the future, I plan to actually move this over to use a compute shader, which hopefully will solve the issue of any like kind of delay between CPU and GPU. So that's basically just a temporary fix for now. So the other aspect that I've added is when we're moving away like this, and then we start to hit fire, the character actually turns to like a 90-degree angle limitation in front of the character. So you'll see, like, no matter how much we move backwards, we won't. But if then I release the shoot button, it will then turn to walk toward. So this, at the moment, because there's no aim offset set up, this kind of doesn't look, it looks a bit weird. But that's because I haven't done the animation yet. Whereas if I like aim with this, we actually have like an actual aim offset, and it will like rotate depending on where it's aiming. Like when you're looking at walls like this, it has that rotation. That's what this will be doing. Like the gun will actually be aiming forward depending on like the orientation of the body. But at the moment I've just kind of laid the kind of groundwork for that aspect. I've not done the animation for a specific reason though. That's because the next step I feel is probably going to be like introducing my own character. Like my whole plan is to really nail down the character movement and shooting and the actual character itself to represent like a final visualization, so to speak, of how I want the game to look, because everything else around it is going to look like shit for a long time until I get the functionality in place. So there's no point me making a bunch of placeholder animations for this character now, because it's going to be a different rig to the actual character that I put in the game eventually. So that basically concludes this update. If you like the video, leave a like, leave a comment. You can follow me over on Patreon for free, where you'll get these videos a week early. If you subscribe, you'll actually get it another week early, so that's 2 weeks early compared to YouTube. And if you want to do none of that, would you kindly bugger off?